All right. So last night, Angela and Sayer were in Charlottesville, getting just Sayer tested for for everything, his anxieties, and you know, not being able to read real well, or just everything. Just trying to figure the kid out. And so I was basically home alone and decided to try and reach out to a friend of mine whom I haven't had much of a connection with in many years. Saw her briefly at Eleanor's funeral, and that's pretty much just the way it's been. Um, anyway, we did all this by way of text. You'll be very happy to know. But we had a great little text conversation, and the story came up. I brought up this. She was like, keep writing, don't ever stop. And I told her that I hadn't written anything in years and years, with the exception of something I wrote for Eleanor, who was in her deathbed, and she asked me to write her something. And I said, I will try and get it to you. And I tried to get it to her. I can't. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me. I'm still learning how to email. I couldn't email it to her, and she says, "Well, just snail mail it to me." I was like, "Yeah, of course. That's what I always used to do. Just mail everybody their letters." But then I found out, after talking to Angela, when I wrote this story, I had intended for her to give it to Frano and Chucky, and then maybe present it to John or what. But I mean, it was just obviously an emotional time. Kind of hurried with plane tickets and this, that, and the other. So they never got the story. What are you eating? That damn dog has chewed every cord off every single tool I have in this shop. Anyway, so Frano didn't get the story. Chucky didn't get the story. John didn't get the story. And one of my favorite Irish fans, Gavin, he hadn't got the story. And then my friend Jan hasn't got the story. And it occurred to me, I'll be damned if I'm going to mail out all these letters. I'm just going to do what I did last time and read it. And they can get the story off of YouTube if they want. And we're going to do our damnedest to get through this story and not cry. We're going to have to start calling this the Crying Craftsman. But after I read it, my daughter apparently was so touched and inspired that she wrote an essay, which is quite brilliant. So I'm going to read mine, and then I'm going to read hers. And y'all can think what you want, I guess. Don't you chew on that. All right. This is called Life's a Bitch and Then You Die. A few days ago, after a seemingly failed attempt to stop cancerous tumors from blocking her colon, my mother-in-law called upon me for advice or opinion. She refers to me as the Oracle, as if I have some mystical insight or philosophy. I accept the title and the challenge as a compliment, for it's not often that an educated, well-traveled woman of 70 plus seeks the advice of a 50-year-old high school graduate male. My voice is already cracking. So in a state of post-operative delirium, Eleanor, or Noelle as my eldest son coined her, unable to pronounce her given name at a young age, asked me to explain to her the unfairness of life versus life being unfair. I will admit I was a little puzzled. I didn't quite understand the assignment because I didn't see a difference in the two ideas. After dwelling on the subject for a few days, I was drawing a complete blank. It did, however, occur to me that given her present state of health, that life must indeed seem very unfair. So as the oracle, it is my job to come up with some theory or philosophy as to why this unfairness has stricken Eleanor. It's worth noting that I haven't written anything in over 4 years. A compulsory desire that I used to do on a regular basis to vent my frustrations or explain my feelings or thoughts seemingly up and disappeared overnight. I don't know why, but the desire to write just left my being. Now I'm called upon, perhaps as a dying wish, to explain the meaning of life and why it's unfair. I have no idea if I'm up to the task, nor do I know if anything I have ever said or written has ever made sense or affected anyone in a positive manner other than myself. But after a 4-year drought, I take this essay very seriously. After all, it may be the last piece of advice I give Eleanor. When I was a teenager, I had a bumper sticker on my truck that said, "Life's a bitch and then you die." Originally, I thought it was funny, and my Uncle Benji used to say it jokingly at work. But eventually it almost or did become my creed. I surrounded myself with negativity and depression. It's funny how subliminal messages can breed similar thoughts and actions. To me, life was truly unfair, and I started to lose an appreciation for it. Lost loves, broken trucks, and abusive friendships just piled on one after the other, day after day, year after year. It just wasn't fair. It almost became more than I could bear. Looking back now, if it hadn't been for writing and drawing, I feel certain I would have succumbed to the pressure. Excuse me. I think this is going to be a 2-beer read. Y'all stop. Sometime in my late teens, early 20s, after adopting 2 mongrel dogs, Buzzard and Dilly, and 1 mongrel friend, Tim, I started to get some perspective. I started to take ownership of my life and my decisions. I discovered that life was not some shadowy entity that randomly floated through the air, tapping people on the head, decreeing, "Your life shall be fair and good," or "Your life will be hard and unfair." I came to understand that life is a gift and life is a verb. Life is not unfair, it just is, and it's what you make of it. I know some of you will argue, "Oh no, you're not going to pull that philosophical bullshit on me. My life is truly unfair. I lost my house in a flood. I lost my legs in a war. I witnessed the suicide of my best friend. My spouse left me. I got cancer. It's just not fair." I can hear it now because I've heard it before. But you know what? That's life. Own it, live it, change it. You know whose lives are really unfair. The ones who no longer have one. The ones that owned it and had it snatched away. The ones living their best life and no longer can. Like the women who are being beheaded for wearing makeup or learning to read. the 19-year-old who drowned in his dorm basement, or the 2-year-old who was crushed in a condo collapse. They can't own it, they can't change it. Their life is gone. But that's my point. It's so unfair. Why would God allow such horrible things to happen to such innocent people with their whole lives ahead of them? You know, I don't know. I can barely explain life, much less the will of God. Even the oracle has its limits. But consider this. Perhaps God unfairly takes these lives as a message, a wake-up call. Life is precious, a gift. Own it. Own your decisions. Own your life, because it can be gone in an instant. I might even have a sip here. Excuse me. I spent the better part of the last 8 months trying to convince my son Hunter that his life is worth living. Up and down the road, hours on end, trying to talk him back off the ledge. Hours and hours on the phone with the crying and the yelling. It seems so unfair to him and to me. I often wonder as a father what I did wrong. What would I have done different? The answers are mostly evident and painful, but I have to own them. I have to own the fact that decisions I made in my life now affect my son's life. I have to make amends with mistakes and help him to build his own life, not end it. Fairness has nothing to do with it. It's just life. I know that the one thing that may seem most unfair to Eleanor is the loss of her husband to another woman. I must concede it was a shitty, unfair thing to do to her as well as the rest of the family. But alas, that's life. I think now that my title of Oracle was probably bestowed on me after our many conversations on the matter. Excuse me. There were countless strategies and ideas on dealing with grief and anger after the divorce. The aftermath took its toll on everyone, but especially Eleanor for obvious reasons. I wonder sometimes in her effort to move on and live her life if she took ownership of more than her fair share of the marital demise. I wonder now if she owned any of it but still carried the burden. That would truly be unfair. After all, he left, not her. He had the affair, not her. He wanted divorce, not her. In living your best life and moving on, it's important to take ownership, but it may be just as important to disown that which is not yours or no longer there. Eleanor has always been a caring, providing mother. Jesus Christ. Eleanor has always been a caring, providing mother and a faithful, loving wife. That's all she needs to own. That being said, it occurs to me that I may have misunderstood Eleanor in my assignment. I assumed when she spoke of the unfairness of life that she was talking about her life. Could I have been wrong? Was she talking about headless women in lipstick? She must have been. Now it makes sense. It's becoming clear. Maybe in her final days, a bit of reverse psychology on the oracle. A departing life lesson from a loving mother. Maybe her quandary of delirium to me was a message. Look at my life and all I've done and been through. I swore I wasn't going to cry. All right, come on. Look at my life and all I've done and been through. I've had the finest upbringing and the best education. I've traveled the world and seen and experienced things others will never have the chance to. I've raised 3 children and seen them marry or engaged, and watched them bring 5 grandchildren into my life. I've experienced love and romance and pain and loss, and I have endured. I've had life throw me a cancerous curveball, and for 6 years, I knocked it out of the park. I've taken any unfairness placed upon me and morphed it to my will to better my existence. Only got 3 more sentences. Fuck. I've lived a good, long, happy, loving life. And when I choose to leave, it will be of my own free will, in my own bed, in my home that I myself built, with my family that I loved and maintained beside me to see me off to the other side. And that's exactly what she did. That's what she wanted. That's how she made it happen. Even while she was dying, she morphed her unfairness and made her own dying wish happen. I thought I was going to get through that without crying. What a dumbass. Let's see if we can get through this one without crying. So this is the one my daughter wrote. So I bet I cut the damn phone off somehow. No, still running. All right, my experience. This is called My Experience with Yellow Legal Pad Paper. I like to think that I come from a family of people who are just fantastic with words and putting their thoughts down on paper, which is correct. My family is all about expressing your most personal, deep, private, confidential thoughts and feelings. Excuse me. And writing a book about it, then proceeding to post it in corners around the house for other members of the family to see. I imagine that when people think of literature, they think of books, articles, etc. While in my life, literature has been nothing but writings on, where was I? But in my life, literature has been nothing but writings on yellow legal pad paper. There have been countless times in my childhood where I've received or stumbled upon a love letter, a confusing piece of poetry, list of passive aggressive suggestions, or pages and pages on depression and anxiety. But they are always and always will be written on yellow legal pad paper. I have received many of these letters primarily from my grandmother and my father. Oftentimes when I receive one from my grandmother, it's a gamble on whether or not she is congratulating me for my determination and will, or if she's lecturing me on how to set the table correctly. So when I come home to see a thick envelope with a letter addressed to me, I get worried. Usually I will put the letter down and prepare myself for the off chance that I am either about to be lectured or congratulated. 9 times out of 10, I have done something fabulous, and she felt the need to explain to me in great detail in illegible handwriting just how great I am. That statement sounds like I don't enjoy these caring words, and I would rather not have the task of reading these letters, which is far from the truth. I take these yellow legal pad letters with great care and keep them in a box in my room. It's something I cherish and often go back to read. These letters were the beginning of my reading journey, my very first exposure to the beauty that is literature. I hold on to the memory of receiving these letters from my grandma, opening the envelope with 4 stamps, holding the thick, tri-folded paper in my hands, struggling to read the handwriting, and flipping the pages over from the staple on the top left. I admire her dedication to make sure that each of her grandchildren understand how valuable they are to her. She, without hesitation, takes every chance she gets to write. While my letters from my grandmother are heartfelt, sincere, and genuine, I enjoy the comedy and passive-aggressive words from my father's yellow legal pad letters. Seeing a sheet of yellow paper sitting on my bed written with black pen in blocky, slightly more legible handwriting, signed me at the bottom, gives me both a run for my money and a curiosity rush as to what task I haven't completed to his standards. I say that in a respectful manner. In parentheses, if I hadn't clarified that, I say that with every ounce of respect in my body, I would be receiving a yellow legal pad letter within the next 3 days. When I began writing this essay, I didn't truly understand the importance of literature. I chose this topic because I thought it was interesting, different, which it is. I think that the way my family communicates is hilarious and endearing, but only now do I understand just how important these pieces of literature are. Taking it to present day, my grandmother, Eleanor, is at the end of her rope. She has had the most beautiful life and is now ready to rest. My family calls my father the Oracle. He is sought after for his advice and encouragement. He is so in tune with his emotions that I think that's why people go to him for advice. I do understand the importance of expressing your thoughts and feelings, but choose to ignore it for fear that I will seem weak. So while my grandmother lays on her bed, she requests one last writing from the Oracle. Her request: what is the difference between life being unfair and an unfair life? A completely baffling request, but my dad obliged and wrote probably the most beautiful writings I have ever read from him. I don't know if I loved it so much because of the circumstances, but I do know that it meant a lot to me regardless. I was given the task of reading this letter to my granny in front of my family because I could not get through it for nothing. I briefed it over before reading it aloud and then bravely sat down next to my grandmother and started to read. I was given this task because everyone in my family thinks I'm dead inside, which is dark and true because I never share how I feel, which is why I think I admire my dad so much, because he isn't afraid to share how he feels. We live in a world where men are expected to hide their feelings, but my dad is the opposite. He doesn't experience that toxic masculinity, and I have always admired him for that. Sometimes I wonder how I got to be the way I am when he is so in tune with his emotions. I truly do envy him sometimes. While reading the Oracle's letter, I realized that literature is more than just what you read. It's how you read it. It's why you're reading it. How you're feeling while reading it. Before this, I had this twisted idea that literature can only be considered literature if it's written by someone famous, or if it has great importance and has been accepted by other great writers in the world. And maybe that is what literature is, but that definition should be changed. Literature is whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be crazy significant to be valued. I could have chosen to write this essay on something so much more significant in my life, like the first book I read or the first essay I wrote. But I chose a simple event in my life that changed the way I view literature forever. Whether or not this definition of literature is universal, I just wish people understood that your literature is valued regardless of its titlement. Having to sit next to my dying grandmother and read a piece of literature that I thought was worth artistic merit, but could be argued otherwise seems so stupid to me. Literature does not have to be worth everyone's opinion to be appraised. I mean, I'm reading a story from a crumpled up piece of yellow notebook paper with words crossed out, sloppy handwriting, misspelled words, and incorrect format, written by some random person that has no worldly presence whatsoever. But that should not change its importance. The most beautiful kind of literature is raw, emotional, and messy. These stories, thoughts, words, poems, it's literature for what it is, and that's all that matters. Yeah. So, Frances isn't as cold inside as she thinks, because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, apparently. She's written several other essays, and right now we know she's placed. We don't know what place she's received, but the writing literature contest at her high school, she's in the top 3, I guess. But anyway, I guess I was able to read you these stories in more than half the time it would take me at the printer, printing, then mailing, licking stamps, waiting for shit to get to Ireland 2 months later. But my friend Steve says I should just wake up every day and read one of my stories. Maybe that's what I'll do. Someone running a chainsaw in my yard. All right, so to Jan and Frano, Chucky, and John, and my biggest Irish fan, Gavin, there you go. Hope you liked them. At some point, I got to read chitlins and caviar because people are asking me what the hell that means. They don't understand the whole analogy of peanut butter and jelly and chitlins and caviar. So maybe next week. Yeah, maybe we'll just make a few things and we'll read a story. Make a few things and read a story. All right. See y'all next time.